and welcome back to When IT Hits the Fan, sponsored by Rhyno Healthcare Solutions. I'm Christian Patillo. Today, so graciously, I have Jalen Byford on. Thank you so much for coming. As I already apologized in last episode, I am in the middle of a move, so you see my very eclectic bookshelf of strange likes and dislikes. But yes, let's jump right into it. Jalen, can you please share what your job position is, not the company, and what your general purview is on a given day?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much. And thank you for having me. So Jalen Byford, I am actually a CIO and operating out of Oklahoma. To give a little background, I'm relatively newer in this particular role. It is now been about 7 months, so December of 2023. It has been amazing. A lot, it definitely pivoting, definitely stretching in terms of, nurturing and skill sets that it's not that I didn't know I had, but that really I had really wanted to kind of grow. And this has been a fantastic opportunity.
Spectacular. Let's go into a little bit about what your new role is, what it covers, and then I'm going to ask how we got there in the long journey.
Yeah, certainly, absolutely. So basically, what I manage and kind of what my role is very specific to manage healthcare. And with that, without going, overly, into too much detail, basically a lot of that entails data, and in all things data related, and whether that be your analytics, your data integrity, the data security, of course, that is first and foremost, and in fact. The data security portion, in many ways, kind of guides and is the compass for all things that we do. It is things like keeping like PHI, PII, the confidentiality. There's a myriad of both federal and state regulations that are. I guess really kind of like run the gamut in this space, and so it's of course keeping abridged of all the regulations, as well as ensuring that we are compliant, that we're not just compliant, but really also looking ahead, looking at things that may occur in the future, right, and keeping our roadmap. Really current and open, right? From what I've noticed, and we'll get into my history momentarily, but that healthcare is very dynamic, and especially now in this age of AI everything, right? Things are moving very fast, and I think it's incumbent on leaders to really keep appraised of where things are going, and to really drive the strategy. It's looking at new technologies and saying, hey, this may be applicable to our environment and may actually improve productivity or ROI. You name it, and so. I think it's been very important to me to keep very current with what is going on, as well as what I kind of see this space morphing into, and because I think that that's a benefit not just to professional growth, but to the company and stakeholders in general, because any innovation, any productivity gain, any ROI, ultimately trickles down. So I think our goal should always be a better experience to the customer, whether that customer be internal, the employee, or ultimately, in the case, our managed care members. That is a goal, and first and foremost. So Did that kind of answer your question? Hopefully.
No, that's thank you very much, and that's giving me so much. I've got my little Rhino Green sponsored journal down here that I'm taking all my questions in. Um, but first, let's talk about you. Where did you start? What has the path been to get you here? Because you've made it to C-suite. Many people never will, and it's such a opportunity, I'm sure. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So basically, got in. It's now been about 11, almost 12 years, and really I hope my story is inspirational to people actually starting out. And I say why. I started out at an area hospital as a desktop support technician. And with everything that goes into that, all right, basically you would consider it like a tier 2, and through that experience, it actually rapidly was able to progress up the proverbial IT chain, and going to a supervisor. And actually progressing to manager and ultimately director, in that role in a span of roughly about 9 years. So I got to wear the multiple hats, right? And I got to start at the ground level. And progressively work up through my experience so that, each kind of, plateau that I reached, right? I could, move further along, kind of establish different skill sets. Of course, look at, relevant certifications in that space, and just progress. And I actually departed that particular hospital and went to work for the state of Oklahoma, also in an IT space, and also actually increasing kind of the expanse of what I was managing. In that role, I was actually I had a department of over 100 people, and so it was a very large, I guess, management opportunity. And that was very good. And so once again, I think it's progressing through, expanding on skill sets that maybe were untapped. And I wouldn't say becoming an expert, but definitely becoming much more of an influence and kind of a voice of in that space, right? In that particular role, the individuals that I was actually speaking of, I primarily hired most of them, and actually so was involved in the interviewing process, the onboarding process, and so it was a great experience. Wouldn't trade it for the world. I have the utmost very high regard for the people in that space, and couldn't say enough. That ultimately kind of led me back into healthcare and kind of merging, some of my experience with the state, as well as my experience in healthcare, and now I'm back, and kind of in a much different arena. However, this has been very good in that I'm learning about things like risk and compliance, and and things that are quite important to most organizations today. Right? It's either if something is making money, if something is costing money, or if things are, from a compliance and risk mitigation standpoint, that's incredibly important to an organization. But to loop back around, I think to maybe somebody starting out brand new, you can do it. It is attainable. If I would just say, keep on learning, keep on growing, keep on expanding, networking, talking to people, but always in this really is always talking about, never lose sight of the end user or the ultimate customer, and as that really is. I mean, that's my compass. That's every day. That's why I do this. So and it could be as simple as helping somebody with something that a PC issue that seems minor, minor by maybe some standards, but if it's impeding the functioning of someone, that it could mean the world to them. And in the same with like the managed care, the member experience, right? If like we should always try to make the experience as easy as possible. And also, of course, things like uptime and system availability are incredibly important. That's almost a given. But I think the icing on the cake, right? What differentiates us from our competitors? And trying to embellish to say, what can we do better? I don't think that we should ever have a status quo and be comfortable, because that's when you're not agile.
Innovation.
Yeah, you're not growing. That may work in the moment, but in this space, as dynamic and kind of aggressive as it is, those who are innovating, those who are doing things better, faster, smarter, are going to have the edge.
Absolutely. And what's funny is, so the way that I originally pitched this podcast to the powers that be over at Rhyno was that I'm someone who came into this field during 2020. I will be the first one to admit this, myself and this new crop of people coming in, we do lack certain experiences that were hallmark, that were a given, time in the office, time in the control room, things like that. And so one of the reason I pitched this podcast was, hey, let's get people from all different generations, from all different levels in our sector to discuss, so that people who perhaps are new to it can have a fighting chance. Let me be honest there. And so that was absolutely perfect and right to the core of what we're talking about here. We're going to be talking about hiring, especially, and the current climate in 2024, which is when we're recording. But I wanted to step back just for a second before we hit that. C-suite is very high. I am incredibly blessed that you're doing this interview, because I am only just reaching that echelon in the guests that I am bringing on. And so I want to get your perspective from that high in an organization. How do you keep an eye on all these miniature moving parts? You have so much under your umbrella. What have you learned, and what would you tell someone else about how to keep track of every piece of the clockwork?
Sure, absolutely. I would say first and foremost, you can't. You delegate, right? Like you hire people that you trust, and embolden them, empower them, and delegate. I don't think that you can't know and see and be everything and everywhere. It's just not going to happen. So you have to hire intelligently, strategically, and get. I mean, you get the people that you trust, and basically delegate to them and give them the pieces of the pie, if you will, because and then have them report back as to status. If it's giving like the 30,000 foot view, for instance, or the elevator pitch of what's going on, then that's manageable. And that actually, and that is, and so maybe, and also approaching it as, okay, so what can I do to help? It's like servant leadership. It's what do you need in terms of, my support? Do you have obstacles? Are there blockers? Do I need to block and tackle? Are there escalations? And in that way, not only is the kind of the daily operations and management possible, it's also fostering an environment of inclusion, and hopefully if things are done right, you're creating new leaders.
Building connections as well, absolutely, and building trust among the team. And I think that dovetails perfectly into this is about the time when I ask the guest, what are your major pain points right now? I have a feeling this is going to transition right from where we were.
Yeah, pain points. So the yeah, I think right now, 2024. We are. It is August. We are going into September. There's a lot going on in the national space, and even each state has elections. And I think that a lot of companies are being kind of very cautious.
Yes.
And what that ultimately kind of trickles down to is hiring, being very, very thoughtful, and seeing like where things are going to go, right? Like I think it's kind of difficult to create an entire strategy when there are moving pieces and parts that may have an impact that you just don't know, and we none of us will know until like November, right? Like at both a local, regional, as well as a national level. So I think what's that's doing, and I do think it's impacting tech as well, is that maybe I think that in the ebb of flow of tech, sometimes you have really good. Like points in time where there's a lot of opportunities out there, and sometimes I think that you don't, and I think that we're in one of those periods right now. And of course, this isn't even without even getting into the hybrid remote work discussion and on site, which is its own topic. But basically, that I think you have a large amount of talented people out there right now who are seeking employment, and the job portfolios out there just. There's not enough jobs for the amount of talent that's out there right now.
And currently, from what I've gathered from other interviews, and always feel free to correct me, but right now, due to this juncture of where we are in the economy and in our political cycle, companies just don't have a high tolerance for spend right now.
No.
And it's affecting both the marketplace and the corporations internally, and certainly any job seeking right now.
Yeah. Yeah, it is, and I don't think it's actually one thing. Like as you just alluded to, I definitely think it's the economy, right? It's the cost of quite a few items is still quite expensive. It's the uncertainty over what does the business landscape, what is 2025 going to look like, and even going a little bit further than that, depending upon what sector you're in, what does that political landscape look like in terms of being favorable, not favorable, no change. So there's a lot that kind of goes into that, and just the general economic outlook itself. But yeah, I agree. I think that I think organizations are being cautious in this time period, and it may turn around. I don't know. I don't think anyone can really reliably predict what's going to happen, but I think we do know right now that if we were looking at the trends, more and more in jobs, if they're not already, if they were remote, they're transitioning to hybrid. And some are even kind of going more on the on-site spectrum, and so and that, who knows, that may change again. But I think that's the reality of where we are right now, and and you just kind of have to pivot and adjust, right? Like I do think that there are, speaking in that space and maybe not going overly too much into it, but there are jobs out there, but obviously they are the ones that are, like I said, primarily on site. You would have to move and relocate, and that's I think that's becoming increasingly difficult for people, and people are just not wanting to do that, right?
Absolutely. And so let's dial back into it just a little bit from your own position, from your vantage point. Um, just getting a little bit more into the specifics of the pain points of hiring. If I were to give you a magic wand, and it could change almost anything in our field at all. The one thing I say that it can't change is bad actors, because I have had plenty of people answer that question with, "Oh well, then just cybersecurity wouldn't be an issue because everybody would be behaving." So that's the one thing the wand can't do, because that kills the question. But what would you have? If you could make some changes, if you could have some people listen to a certain plan, what might you alter, even in a magical way that perhaps couldn't happen in the real world?
Um, well, in terms of changing anything in the IT space, or sure. So I guess that's complex, right?
Absolutely.
I think that. I think that there's kind of been definitely kind of maybe a misalignment in terms of, what's out there in terms of what like people think certifications do, or training, and what in the real world, whether it be the private sector or the public sector, what is actually needed, right? And so like I'm sure there are some very good programs out there that do actually focus on this, but my observation and this probably does go back to 2020 ish on, is that a lot of like really it's a mixed bag, and so you have people, and particularly maybe those new, who maybe definitely do not have the skill sets that are needed, and I think a lot of organizations are spending a lot of time and money in the onboarding process, and basically even the first 6 months just being a initiation and really kind of a retraining as to the things that the industry or the organization really needs, right? Versus what was brought in, and that's not to discredit the value of some certifications nor training. It's just not aligned with what business needs now.
Is there specifics you've noticed of what people bring in versus what perhaps is more necessary?
Yeah, and it's of course we're talking across different IT disciplines, so anywhere from like the service desk to cybersecurity to infrastructure to DevOps, but yeah, I think that in general, you really have to you have to communicate first and foremost, and I think that having some of the soft skills that IT professionals or maybe traditionally weren't known for is becoming more important, and not just for IT, but really anybody kind of operating in this environment, because you're interacting, you're using different communication vehicles. A lot of I think that much like this podcast, much is still virtual, right? Much is like Teams, Zoom, and maybe analog conference calls, you name it. But there's also in-person interactions. There so and those are important. I think that you can't you just kind of set aside the soft skills portion of it because it doesn't work. I think you need more and more today. You need to establish connections with people, and whether that's over Teams, over Zoom, whether that's in person, you need to have that connection in order to actually be successful, in my opinion. And so again, kind of like, and that was kind of I found it very interesting in my own journey, because I always thought, oh, you know what? Well, I'll go and get this certification, and and I will be smarter and better, right? And know like the systems even more, and not even ever thinking, maybe like, because I would hear in like motivational podcasts or presentations or whatnot, and they were very focused on things like culture. They were very focused on things like storytelling, like how to get your point across. How to effectively listen, how to be a servant leader, and some of those concepts were like, what does this have to do with IT? Like, why do I care about this? But it becomes more apparent. I think the higher up you go, because you could have all the best idea, and you can be very knowledgeable, but if you can't articulate that and you can't sell that, then it's useless. And so in most organizations, of course, the decision makers are going to be in the C-suite. And things cost money. And if you cannot articulate exactly the value of, then it doesn't matter, because it will never happen. So
absolutely. And let's latch onto that word culture. One, what do you think a very healthy corporate culture might be? And two, how would you foster it?
Yeah, absolutely. There is so much about this topic right now, and I think it's great because I think it's something that is the lifeblood of any organization, any enterprise, and you really need to nurture. And foster a culture, because even if you don't, one is going to happen anyways.
Yes.
It's organic, and so you can either kind of frame the narrative yourself, or the narrative will write itself, and it's not always maybe the best. I think first and foremost, to have a positive culture, and you see this a lot, where people have to you have to trust. And given you're not going to have any organization that's going to be able to communicate and tell every employee every single thing going on. So I don't think like that. That's not what anybody's ever saying, but it's that, hey, you trust that your supervisor or the powers that be have the best interest of yourself in mind, as well as the company, and that if you have an issue, that you can actually talk to someone in confidence, and maybe there are things that are just not possible. Right, there are things that are good ideas, but whether it be financially, there's a myriad of reasons. However, I do feel like giving people the opportunity to vocalize and communicate that and actually get feedback is incredibly important. I think that goes a long way, because at that point in time, people will feel validated, even if say like a request doesn't pan out. At least it was expressed, validated, and heard. Versus and this is, and I think feedback like that needs to be much more like supervisor or leader engaged, because there's surveys, right? There's a ton of surveys out there, and that gauge employee engagement. Hope, like how employees feel about the future. There's so many things, but and that's very good from an analytics perspective for maybe gleaning company insights. However, that is not good for.
It doesn't foster that connection. It's not.
No,
there's no pathos to it.
No. So I'd like some of the best leadership in organizations that I've seen have been very transparent. About a myriad of things, and granted, there are going to be limitations there. But if you are transparent, then there's never anything to hide, because it is all out there. The other thing, and that I kind of spoke about this earlier, was empowering your people, right? And again, industries are different. There are different roles, and sometimes you do need, maybe a more hands-on or micromanaging individual. However, I think in general, if you empower people, you delegate to them, then they have ownership It's not just, oh, this is my job. I mean, this is a career, right? And this is, you are actively part of the making this successful, or failing.
Absolutely. And it is healthcare. Lives are quite literally on the line, even if we are the ones that are hands on keyboard. Absolutely. We've hit the 29-minute mark. It always goes so incredibly quick. It's like a temporal optical illusion how quickly this podcast always goes. I like to end with one specific question, especially because of the mission of the podcast, which is to help newer people in our field sort of find their footing in this time of intense change. I like to ask guests if you could put one bit of wisdom in a bottle and send it back at time to yourself at the beginning of your career. What would you tell yourself?
Sure. So I think going back, and this actually goes directly to the soft skills. And so I think in it, regardless of role, right? Like I understand there are some IT roles that, don't interface with the end user hardly at all. However, really focusing and putting more of an emphasis on that. Because again, like you have to communicate. And you have to, and sometimes you have to be able to relay very complex issues, very complex statements to non-technical people. And so
Yes.
the more that you can do that, the better and the farther you will go, regardless of discipline. Because that you're getting your ideas, your points across, and ultimately making people understand, versus just spouting out a bunch of IT jargon gibberish. That would be my advice.
Absolutely. Thank you. And that perfectly puts a ribbon on everything we talked about today. And as always, I just want to thank you so much for making time for us, especially in your incredibly busy schedule. You have been Jalen Byford. I have been Christian Patillo. And this has been When IT Hits the Fan, sponsored by Rhyno Healthcare Solutions. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. And we'll see you again next week. Bye.